Alright, hey everyone. So this is Ronnie, and Dr. Bybee has invited me to uh, share some of my thoughts about Chapter 2, which has the title of The Main Reef Builders and also the Space Occupiers. So, one of the things I found quite interesting about this chapter is it relates quite a lot to the video that we watched a couple of days earlier, which is chasing corals. So in this video, it talked a lot about how the coral colony is, and also how the corals are, what they are. And this chapter is basically really similar to what I've learned in the video. So I just want to share a little bit of my thoughts on this. So the first thing that I want to share with you guys is how corals are formed and why are they so, what's so special about them. So one thing I found really interesting is that the corals that are formed are from different polyps from the reading, and these polyps actually act differently. So even though they are same polyps, they have a different occupation in the coral. So they serve a different purpose. So each one of these polyps, some of them are for hunting, some of them do photosynthesis, some of them are for building up the structure of the coral. And I find it really interesting how it is that they work out together, even though they are the same, but they aren't really the same. But they have this way of working with each other, and they are able to build up as a colony to provide food source for themselves to survive. And then the second thing that stood out to me was the competition between the corals. And I never really knew that corals are really aggressive and territorial. So from the reading, I learned that corals actually have these different mechanisms, actually three or four mechanisms that they use to actually grow or uh, invade other coral territories. I think because due to the competition of the sunlight and also resources. So some of them will actually use toxins, some of them will eat up the other colony next by them. So I found that's really interesting how on land we have animals that are really territorial, and also in the ocean, a coral that which kind of looks like a plant is also super territorial as well. And then the other point I want to talk about is one that mentioned also on Marco Polo as well, is the microalgae, and why is it so important to the corals. So microalgae is a symbiosis has a symbiosis relationship with the corals, and what they do inside the polyps is they have this mechanism called photosynthesis, which they grab in the sunlight and also form food source for the polyps. So for the corals. So even though some of the polyps they have like hands, they can catch animals as well. Their main food source is photosynthesis, which is kind of like plants on land. And then the last point that stood out to me was the use of seagrass and mangroves. So seagrass and mangroves they actually occupy a different space than the corals, but they are really important with each other. The seagrass and mangroves they provide a food source for some of and food source and protection for their own ecosystem, but they are also really important because they actually filter some of the sand or minerals so they do not get into the corals, which keeps the corals alive. And it's actually also really important for them because they also break up the waves to protect the corals, as corals need really specific conditions for them to survive, such as they need to have a specific current, specific temperature, and also specific location for them. And so I found that was really cool how there's like interchangeable relationships between these different animals and plants and organisms. Even though they might not look like they're working together, they have this symbiosis relationship that they can help each other out. And here are some of the questions that I actually have, so I find it quite interesting. The first one is, I know that there are some jellyfish, most specifically Portuguese man of war. So Portuguese man of war is a combination of a lot of organisms built up as a colony. So does that also count as a coral, since corals are also a colony of polyps working together uh, as a as a whole, as a colony, not an organism. So are these the same or are they different? And then the second question that I have is, mangroves and seagrass, they play a really big impact on corals. So they break up the waves and they also filter the sediments. But what's the purpose for corals, vice versa to the seagrass and mangroves? So yeah, these are the main two questions that I have for myself, and yeah, I hope to look forward to see you guys in discussion and also to listen to you guys' input.